There is no doubt in my mind as we put leaders around a table like we are here today that the conversations could continue to go on. I love hearing the volume rise a little bit, but we do want to kind of walk through some things. The reality is for many of you, you've been down this road before. You've been life group leaders. Some of you are old school enough to have been community group leaders. Some of you even old school enough to be growth group leaders. Welcome to the well. We've continued to evolve in our dozen or so years doing what we're doing. So the reality is we don't want to waste your time with hey, this is a small group and here's this and that, but we want to equip you to be better at doing what it is you feel God has called you to do. And so we're going to walk you through some things here today. We are going to record a couple of these sessions as an opportunity of taking this information and putting it online for our friends who couldn't be here today, but I had to crack up as we were just in our table talking a little bit just by way of introduction. You start hearing stories, right? And you've all got them. If I said, hey, give me an awkward life group story that you've experienced. The reality is like we could be here till Jesus comes because life groups are by nature awkward. Why? Because we're involved. And so it'd be great and really clean and simple if we would not show up and nobody else would either. But the fact is we do show up and so do they. And they bring with them baggage, backgrounds, good and bad, and you throw it all in this thing called a group, and you shake the whole thing up, right? Then you're going to talk about the issue of the holiness of God and his desire for us to be more like him to a group of people that are not like him, and now you're going to talk about how you can become more like him so everybody's uncomfortable, and so now you add awkwardness, background, baggage, discomfort, and then we're going to do that every week. I mean, that's what we're doing. And so in my group this morning, we were laughing because there's a couple at our table who showed up to their first life group, couple in an older season of life, not old by any means, but older, and they walk into a group full of like young singles, young marrieds, like young people. Different enough that they felt old and they felt young, right? Showed up. The book gets handed out of what they're going to go through. It's sex and the supremacy of Christ or of God or sex. It's sex, right? That's all the older couple saw. So sure enough, here this older couple entering in with this younger group and trying to figure out how do we make all this work. And yet the fantastic thing in that story is maybe like yours, it was brilliant because God used it. Because it really doesn't matter old or young. It really doesn't matter black or white. It really doesn't matter rich or poor. When we all come together, there's a sense of oneness. There's a sense of shared journey together. And it turned out, at least for the people at our table, being a fantastic group experience. And chances are you've had those too. But I want to talk a little bit about the vision of why we're doing what we're doing and maybe help you understand the bigger picture. Now, again, some of you have heard this before, but I just want to remind us. I had lunch here earlier this week with a couple that's been a part of our church for 5 years. They're life group leaders. They dove in, they went through discovery, they jumped into a life group, now they're life group leaders. So in terms of like getting connected, they're, the kind of people we go, hey, be like them, right? And so in the conversation though, they were concerned, and I think it's a valid concern, that as time goes by, how do we get to know one another better? Like how does a church feel like family over time? And they asked a very interesting question. They said, look, in 10 years, are we going to be a church that knows each other better, or am I going to feel as alone in 10 years as I do now? And they said, I've got a small group. My life group's great. And I'm sure in 10 years we're going to deepen together with the 10 of us. But what about the church as a whole? And I thought, boy, that's a really interesting concept. And I said, well, what do you think? And so this couple began to throw out ideas about how we could do life groups in a way that would help the whole church deepen. And as we were talking, I'm kind of chuckling because in some ways, when it comes to how we do life groups, it's a been there, done that thing. And so we have, over the years, tried just about everything. We started the church with a lot of collegians, so we went on a semester basis. And I had the idea, being a kind of a closet introvert, but really enjoying people, saying, well, why don't we start in September and then end in December, start in January, end in May, and we'll force people to get into new groups every single time. So we'd get into groups, and then 3 months later, we'd force a breakup, and then we'd introduce them to new people, and then we'd force a breakup. And I thought, this is going to be great. And all the extroverts loved it. And all the relational people, the harmonizer-based people, hated it. Because they knew, look, in 90 days, this person's gone anyway. I'm not telling them nothing. So our groups were really connected. Like, people had fun because they never asked anything awkward. It never went there because they knew in 90 days I'm moving on, so I'm not sharing with you anything. So we said, okay, well, that's not going to work. Let's go September to May. And let's run the groups like that. And instead of them feeling shallow, let's help them feel deep by closing the groups. And so everybody came in the summer, and we got everybody connected in groups, and we launched all the groups, and we kind of said bon voyage, and off they went in September. And then a new guy came in October. He said, I want to get in a group. I said, oh, man, they're all closed. And so literally we had people going, are you telling me that I don't have a life group I can be a part of because I came in October? And I had to go, yes. So that didn't work. We said, well, let's not do that. Then we said, well, what if we took groups and said, okay, the groups now will go together forever. So you get in a group, you just bury each other. It'll be great, like years from now. Which is fine. And so people went, and all of a sudden their worldview of what it meant to be the church came like this. And now it was just about their group, and all they did was hang out with their group, and they just hung out with their groups. And everybody else could go to hell for all they cared. They would never say that out loud, nor should probably I, but that's what it felt like. And we said, well, that's not right. Let's not do that. So then we said, well, let's do open groups. Okay, so like the idea of let's put 10 of you in a group and let's always have an open chair, right? So we'll always invite more people in, which is great. So there's 10 of you in a group and you all start inviting a person, and so now there's 20 of you in a group and you start looking around at your apartment and you go, I can't fit this many people. So now we're going to split the group, right? And all the optimists who are half full go, yes, split the group, take over the world. And then you realize, well, who's going to go and who's going to stay? You go, I stay, but I want to be with you. And who's going to lead the group? Well, this person's going to lead the group. Well, I like the other leader better. And we realized, well, maybe that's not the best option either. And so we said, well, maybe that's not going to work. And we said, okay, split them up all by campuses. So you're at North, 9 a.m. I don't care who you know at FIG, you are not in a life group with them. So all the FIG people are doing their thing. And they all got their FIG tattoos. And all the Clovis people went to the rodeo together. And all the North people hung out, north of Herndon and never dared go to the tower, right? And everybody did their thing. But relationships aren't divided by borders like that, are they? I mean, that's arbitrary. The reality is we all have friends at all of our campuses, and it'd be nice to be able to do life with them. And so we said, well, that's not really the best way to do it. And we said, well, if groups are really about impacting our community, maybe they ought to be all about serving our community. And so we said, okay, they're all going to have service elements. Mandatory, required. You have to serve somewhere. And we're going to evaluate that. We're going to check up on you on that, which, is fine. But what happens to the person who just buried their son and now they're in life group? Do you really think the best thing for their spiritual life is to go serve? Some would say, yes, get over yourself, get out of yourself. I go, okay, great. Why don't you walk in those shoes for a moment? Why don't you carry the weight of the ashes of mourning and then ask the question, what's best for you spiritually? And it might be that in those moments you don't need to serve, you need a group of people that could just breathe life into you. And so we realized, well, then having a mandatory, this is the way we do it, that's not going to work. And so then we said, well, wait a second, how do we get people connected into groups? Like, if I come as a guest and I want to connect in a group, but I'm going to come to your living room. I'm sorry, what's your name? Well, I know that, Jared, but I'm saying, just by way of point. Thank you for reacting. So I'm going to go into Jared's group, right? And Jared's got 8 people that are signed up in his group. I think they're all best friends, and I'm going to come in like the awkward person out. Now I feel like I'm back in junior high. So I'm going to show up to a group I really wasn't invited into. I signed up for it, some guy whose name I know, and I'm going to be in his living room. That's too big a step. So we said, well, maybe we should do mid-sized groups. So it's 40 to 50 people, and, it's easier to this and that. My point is, as I sat literally over Indian food, talking about all the various ways to do life groups, you realize, look, in some ways you've been there and you've done that. And in some ways it really doesn't matter what you try, does it? There's not a right or a wrong. The answer is ultimately yes. We ought to do all of those things. And the key to all of those things is the same thing every single time. It doesn't matter if it's campus-based groups, serving groups, only there for 90-day groups, break up, find new best friend groups, bury each other groups. It really doesn't matter what type of group you do. The number one consistent thing that makes or break whatever type of group you do is the same thing. You know what it is? You. It's leaders. You put good leaders in any type of group setting, any type of group context, and you'll have a good group. It doesn't matter what the model is. The key is you. So that's why we're here today, is to help you be the best leader you can be. Now, the reality is we're still trying a bunch of different structures. And, just in case you're like hoping we're never going to change, you've been around, most of you, long enough to know that's definitely not going to happen. We are going to change and adapt, and we're going to make fun of ourselves in 5 years for what we thought today was brilliant. And that's the way it goes. But the key is you. So I want to talk a little bit about the whole issue of life groups, why we do them, what they're about, etc. Great leadership quote, a guy named John Maxwell, who's written about 5 billion books on leadership, said everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think in some ways, like him or not, I think he's right. And so you're the key. And what makes you so crucial is you accomplish the mission of the church. If you're a note taker, I've got a couple things that might be of worth. If you're bored, you could just doodle, I don't care. Couple things. When it comes to what the church is an equipping place, the church is a training place, and the church is a sending place. It doesn't matter what church you go to. We may call it different things. Here we might say we're going to help people connect to each other in every neighborhood. Other places are going to have other mottos. Look, at the end of the day, we're to train, we're to equip, we're to send. That's what the church by design is called to be. So from an equipping standpoint, Paul's very clear that he gave some as apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers for the equipping of saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ. Our job as pastoral staff is not to have a reserved parking spot and ask you to call me Pastor Brad. Our job instead is to flip that model on its head and say, you're the ones out in the front lines. You're the one doing ministry. How can we train you and equip you? What do you need? How can we give you what you need so that you can be the church? It's also got a training piece, though. It's not just the equipping, it's training. The difference between, by the way, equipping and training is equipping has to do more with content, information. Training has to do with the awkward conversations. Paul says, the things that you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. There's a training piece that comes when you're sitting in a life group and somebody says something that's inappropriate. And you in the moment have a choice to make as a leader. Do I just let it go and move on, hope nobody heard? Or do you address it? And if so, how? That's training. You've got to know how to do that. It's not just the knowledge of I should do that. It's the tact and skill of knowing how to. It's knowing that you ought to never lead a life group without something to write on. And it's not that you're taking notes about what's said. You're taking notes about who said what. And then after the group, you've got a follow-up list. I need to follow up with him on that, and her on that, and him on that, and him on that. Now you're discipling the individual. Because you facilitate a group, but you disciple an individual. That's the training piece. But it's also a sending component. Every church has a sending component because Jesus gave us a great commission. I mean, Jesus gave us the greatest patent speech in the history of mankind. Go, therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all I've commanded you. Boy, we don't talk about that part. We go, we share, we save, we baptize. Yay, God. I go, oh, finish the passage. Make a disciple and teach them to obey all I've commanded you, which means the Great Commission isn't just about winning people to Jesus. It's about making disciples. And so there's, along with this, a sending piece that we need to go. As a church, we've built this church around equipping, and so we've got Academy, and you can learn from Dr. Taylor, who is brilliant. Rick and I sat the other day, and he was talking to me about Roman culture as if he grew up in Rome. I mean, literally, he's talking, I'm just taking notes. Like, this is a seminary level stuff. If you finished Academy or going through Academy, you're getting master's level stuff. It's amazing. We created a residency program to equip. We want to have some equipping options. Our services are equipping options. So that from a church perspective, we're providing equipping time. So very few churches have taken a philosophic stance on using the church as an equipping piece. Most services are geared to reach non-believers. We're saying instead of growing a big church, we want to grow big people. So if we can equip you in our services every week and you understand the flow of your Bible, or you understand the theme of progress of belief, the Gospel of John, or the implications of the I am statements, you'll live big in whatever neighborhood God has put you in. That's what we're trying to do. But the training side, that's where groups come into play. See, a life group is really not just about content, but application. It's life on life. It's shaping conversations. It's stimulating discussions. Most people grow at need to know moments. So how do we create those? I was just talking to a guy who got back from the mission field. I said, how was your trip? He said it was very, I think the word he used was stressful. I said, why is that? He says, I don't like being in front of people. He says, and my leader who led the trip kept putting me in front of people. And I said, congratulations. That's awesome. See, a life group is something like a mission experience where you're forced out there. You're forced to enter in on things you don't want to talk about. You came to the group wanting to hide it. You came to the group not wanting to discuss it. And as a leader, you see it. It's like poker. Everybody's got to tell, right? So you can tell something's there. And so you start digging a little bit. And now life change happens when you're asking those kind of questions. A life group is on-the-job training where you're doing things together. You're facilitating life change together. It's faith and deeds coming together. That's the concept of living out the rhythms of helping people connect together into each other in every neighborhood that we're going to cover. That's the training side of what takes place in groups. We've said before, life change happens in smaller groups. Look, I can't disciple. The communicators can't disciple everyone in our church. Well, and truthfully, you can't disciple everyone, but boy, what if you took a couple? What if you just had 6 or 8 people that were in your life group and you just said, we're going, and we're going deep together. It's going to take a while, and I'm going to feel uncomfortable, but you know what? I'm going to get these people, and we're going to go where we've never gone before, and that's towards more maturity in Christ. That's the kind of thing we want to happen in a life group. Life groups also, by the way, are the primary place where care happens. With video teaching, we get the question all the time from those who are guests, like, hey, wait a second, so I was at this campus and the screen came down. Are you my pastor? Because I saw you on the screen, but I came up to talk to you that day and you weren't even there. Are you my pastor? Well, the answer is yes, with a lowercase y, yes. When crisis happens in someone's life in our church, the hope would be that we have to fight through the multitudes to get to their bedside. That we go to the hospital and eventually I get a call. Yeah, so-and-so's in the hospital. Yeah, and then I'll go. But as I go, I'm fighting through the campus pastor who's already there and the life group leader who's already there and the life group that's already there and the team you serve on who's already there. And I realize there's 30 people from our church in the waiting room. What do I need to do here? Other than encourage the people to do what God has already done, which is place them in your life as a pastor. I mean, that's the goal. That's what it means to be the church, which means we're asking you to put on big boy pants a little bit. See, this isn't a Bible study. Hey, what'd you get for number 2? Who cares what you got for number 2? That's not spiritual forming conversation. Or, hey, for God so loved the blank. Anybody? Anybody? Are you kidding me? How about, hey, how's your marriage? Oh, it's good. What would she say if I asked her? Well, she's not here. What if I called